Good morning, David.
Good morning, Amelia. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
And also, hello and welcome to whomever may be watching. David and I are so grateful for your time, and we hope that you will subscribe and follow along with us on this series of exploratory conversations that we're going to be having. So by way of introduction, I'll say my name is Amelia Sargisson, and I'm an actor. I was born and raised in Montreal, and I trained and am based out of Toronto. And pre-COVID, obviously, I had the immense thrill of performing on stages across this country, from Cranbrook, BC to Halifax, Nova Scotia. And most recently, I was at the Stratford Festival for 2 seasons, where in 2018, I lived the most ecstatic creative experience of my life, which was to play Eve in the world premiere of Paradise Lost by the Governor General's award-winning playwright Aaron Shields, in what I thought was a pretty dynamite production, directed by Jackie Maxwell. And I think that David agrees, but more on that later. Yeah. And I would have been back at Stratford now, playing Sue in the world premiere of the latest piece from National Treasure Anne-Marie MacDonald. But that production, like the entire Stratford season, is one of the many great things that COVID claimed. So here I am with my friend and perhaps some would say unlikely collaborator, David Weitzner. Now, David, you are a writer, a philosopher, a former music industry executive, and also a professor of strategy at Toronto's York University. So before we get into how a business professor and stage actress came to be pals, can you just tell me a little bit more about what it means to be a professor of strategy?
Sure. At least as I see it, I mean, everyone brings something different to their profession, but I view strategy as the place where managers are trained to think holistically. We are the folks who wonder or who recognize that business people have to make difficult decisions every day, decisions that are high risk and decisions that affect a lot of people. And so we're the place where we recognize that you need to think about the economic implications of your decision, the ethical implications. We recognize we have to understand human psychology and risk management, politics and religion. We're like the holistic space in the business school where we try to bring together a diversity of fields and disciplines into helping folks make better decisions under conditions of uncertainty and risk.
Yeah. That's, I feel like that's so vital right now. It addresses such a gap in the sort of current capitalist business model. And I just want to read a little excerpt from this article you wrote that we'll be talking about in greater depth later. But just because I think it reflects so beautifully what you just articulated. So you wrote in this article titled, "Art galleries, theaters, and concert halls are the safe spaces we need to have unsafe conversations. As a business professor, I spend my working hours talking to people who pay a lot of money to have their capitalist inclinations reinforced. We don't get too many progressives in management programs, which is as much to our detriment as it is to theirs. MBAs don't get exposed to important critiques of an economic system that has evolved to work well for the few at the expense of the many, while most humanities majors never come to truly understand the economic mechanisms that support innovation and progress." And that just really speaks to me because, you know, I'm not a humanities major, I'm an arts major, I'm a creative, I'm not a major at all, actually, I only have an undergrad degree, but, you know, I'm from that part, or I'm from that side that has never really understood the economic systems prescribing my quotidian,
Right.
and you're on that side where you get all that and you're advocating for sort of more humanity there.
Yes,
So
yes,
anyway, I just think
yes.
that's really cool. And I think that this segues into my next question for you, which is, you had a very rich path to the role of professor of strategy, but probably an indirect one via philosophy, via music.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that all of this informed your worldview. So can you tell me a bit about how you came to this role or to this calling in your circuitous way?
I mean, it was very, very indirect. If you would have found me as an 18-year-old at Western, getting high quite frequently and taking philosophy, that you would be ending up in a business school, I would have thought that you were a paranoid hallucination and fled. But indeed, that's where I've ended up. So yeah, I mean, I started off in philosophy. Philosophy was engaged in me, in particular religious philosophy. I come from a background that was very much enmeshed in religious thinking and a religious upbringing. And I still enjoy the spiritual sort of questioning. And so, my background is in philosophy. My passion has always been in music, although I've never been a particularly good musician. So I ended up working in the industry for a couple of years while doing my MBA. And from there, as we will discuss later, because I think you have insight to this too, I found the business of music to be disheartening and soul destroying, and was killing my love of music. And so even though I had some wonderful experiences while working in the music industry for a few years, I ultimately had to flee lest I stopped loving music, and ended up doing a PhD in strategy. And here I am today.
So cool.
Yeah.
So the other day on the phone, you very charmingly described us as two kids who happened to cross paths and wanted to chat some more.
Yes.
And so as my friend and the very talented Canadian playwright Geordie Mand would say, and I can just picture her with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea and leaning in to say this, everybody loves a good origin story. So do you want to talk about how these sweet two kids came to cross paths? Because, you saw me before I saw you.
Yes, that is true. I was the pursuer in this relationship. So, I came across your performance of Eve in Paradise Lost at a very fortuitous time. I had just finished writing my last book, which is 15 Paths. And that book was really about, a disillusioned business professor, me, who had gone through some things, as they say, and decided that I needed to figure things out with the counsel of some of my artistic heroes. And really the premise of the journey of that book is that I wasn't finding arguments particularly satisfying. And so I was turning to folks who trade in imaginative expressions rather than argumentative expressions. And I reached out to my heroes, Lee Ronaldo of Sonic Youth, Nels Klein from Wilco, the legendary Lydia Lunch, and some other folks to talk through shit, to try and figure things out together. And it was an amazing journey. And it was really sort of pushed and solidified my view and my belief that artists have something to say that goes beyond the art that they offer or their performance, as it were. And I was starting my next book, the forthcoming Connected Capitalism, How Jewish Wisdom Can Transform Work. And so my headspace, actually, when I saw that play, was very much thinking about Eve, the garden story, Paradise Lost in general. And I saw your performance and it just struck me. Beyond the brilliant writing and beyond the brilliant production, what you as an individual brought to the Eve character really blew my mind. As someone who has, played with the Adam and Eve story literally since childhood, you showed me a new side of Eve, a new way to conceive of Eve, and it struck me. And I thought, I have something to learn from this person. And I left the theater thinking, I have to learn from this person. And it's something that doesn't happen too often, but when it does, I follow through. And so some months later, when we were going to do some events to promote 15 Path. We were going to have an event in Toronto with Danny Lynn and Lee. I thought you would be the perfect person to moderate it, because you both, you know, have your foot in the door as an actor and as a theater person, but also, you know, I've discovered from your interviews and talking with you that, you know, you have a very spiritual side as well. And I thought bringing those two energies together would be very useful. Didn't work out, but yeah, we continue to be in touch, and you've been a participant in my next book.
Yeah, I just want to interject to say, well, firstly, you know, thank you so much for that very generous feedback. And of course, I feel that the re-envisioning of Eve there that excited you so much was also kind of the blueprint for that. Obviously, came from Erin and from her imagination. And you know, she comes to writing from acting, and I know for her that writing is an embodied experience, and part of why I think her work is so electrifying is because it costs her so much to create it, because she really does immerse herself in each role. So it was her paradigm shift there that I just really had the good fortune to step into. So I just need to give her due credit for that.
Sure.
And I also just want to say that, you know, just with regards to the very mission of 15 Paths, you know, it's been so, that you set out to talk to artists and to amplify their voices. It's so, in a way, unbelievable, but, you know, to focus on the positive, like, affirming and exciting to me to meet somebody from the, you know, business world who holds this belief about the arts. And I was so flattered and excited to receive that invitation to moderate this book launch. And I hadn't read the book, obviously, at the time, because it was kind of hot off the presses, but just the title, you know, how to tune out noise, turn on imagination, and find wisdom, like that turned me on so much. It's so stimulating, and what a premise. So yeah, but anyway, but then I finally got to meet you last summer when you interviewed me for your upcoming book, Connected Capitalism: How Jewish Wisdom Can Transform Work. And I can't wait to read it, but tell me about how you came to place our interview in the chapter where it appears.
Right. So, you know, I take a very organic approach to learning. And so while the first book, you know, while 15 Path was deliberately a journey book where I was going to go out and speak to folks, this book was less of that. You know, in terms of the formation, it was more me trying to amplify and explore the relationship between my spiritual side and my spiritual roots in Judaism in particular, and the practical applications that they've netted in terms of strategy and business in general. But I can't help but learn from people. And so I wanted to talk to you and others. We speak to Ronnie Burkett is in the book, another local theater genius, as well as diverse folks. We have David Frum in the book, who is a conservative, former George W. Bush speechwriter. So I like to learn from different voices. And so when I got together with you, I didn't necessarily have an agenda. I just knew that you would teach me something. And when we started talking, two things struck me. The first thing that struck me is just as you were sharing your process, as we were discussing about, you know, what you do, so many of the themes tied directly to my book and to what I describe as spiritual work, you know. So I'm trying to tell business folks who may be less open, or at least who may less naturally recognize that their work can be spiritual, but I'm talking to someone whose work is spiritual, you know, and you came from that position, and that was exciting. But the specific chapter ended up being around your discussion of forgiveness. That's really the piece that moved me, because I believe we're in a time, we're in a political moment where there's very little space for forgiveness, both on the left and the right. It's not an ideological thing. I think it's truly it's a moment in time where forgiveness isn't talked about enough, or is perhaps discredited somewhat. And I don't believe you can do spiritual work without forgiveness. Now, as you'll see in the book, and as you know from our discussion, that doesn't mean everyone gets to be forgiven, and it doesn't mean all crimes should be forgiven, but we need to think sensibly about forgiveness. And what was great about learning from you is, you know, you actually let me know that there are strategies in the rehearsal room about a type of forgiveness to play a role. And then you talked a lot about your personal experiences about, you know, forgiveness. And so that piece of the conversation was centered and sort of reinforced my belief that creative professionals are engaging in spiritual work and have what to teach. I'm not going to say non-creative professionals, because there's creativity in everything, but certainly those who work in more traditional, non-artistic based industry.
I think really where we've landed is on the fact that there's this gap, because so many of these creative spaces are now shuttered due to COVID. And, you know, as our conversations have evolved, we've also I've shared with you how many of them weren't even safe to begin with, which I think is something that you had already gleaned through your interviews with all of these artists in 14 Paths. So where are the safe spaces to have unsafe conversations? And that's what we very humbly and with just a spirit of curiosity and experimentation are going to try to create here.
Yeah. And so let me build on your last point. You know, it's popular right now to talk about unpacking our privileges. And if I were to reflect and unpack my privilege, I think the biggest privilege I had growing up is I was exposed to some amazing teachers who made this safe space for me. Teachers who didn't have to, right? You know, people who many of the times, like I said before, were folks who strongly disagreed with me or I disagreed with them, but they created a space where I could explore this, you know, and very receptive also. Like I've always said, you know, to me, the difference between that I found in my lived experience of a great mind and a mediocre mind is the great minds have always been generous. You know, like, you know, when you look at the folks I interviewed in my book, like why would Lydia Lunch take a call from me? You know, like there's, you know, because she's amazing. And that's what brilliant people do. They want to keep that space. And so knowing that that's the privilege, what I hope we can do here is something similar, which is using our resources and the folks who we know to bring them here, and then invite the viewers who will hopefully exist and come and find us to join in these conversations and have access to that space. And you know, the next step of that ambition, you know, what I would hope to see happen is, as we are a space for people who believe in art to sort of try to bring out the social good in art, but not the art itself, hopefully through here, folks will get turned on through the ideas of artists and art affiliated folks and explore their art in other contexts as well.
I just will echo that. I also feel so lucky to know so many unique and brilliant people, and to add their voices to this conversation, I think will be really valuable.
Yeah. Awesome.
So stay tuned.